Well, hello and welcome to our front yard garden in the South Carolina upstate. It is a beautiful Friday morning. We've had rain the last 3 days, but now the sun is back out, as is typically the case down here. We are supposed to actually hit close to 80 degrees today, even though it's November 9th and of 2024, if you're watching this years from now. This is episode 40 of the year, and there isn't a lot going on garden-wise, but there's enough to show it off. And it's sort of amazing that we have as many flowers as we do for the how late it is in the fall. Last year by this time there wasn't a whole lot left because we had some early frosts, but we really have not had a full frost yet. And looking at the forecast, we probably won't have a frost for at least another couple of weeks. So we may be able to go into Thanksgiving and still have some flowers left to show off. Although certainly the number has dwindled significantly as the days have gotten shorter. And even without a frost, a lot of the plants are preparing to end their growing season, at least for now. So as we always start off here at the mailbox bed, there isn't a lot going on. Last week we had these Giacomini clematis still blooming to a fair degree, but with all the rain that we had, most of the petals have fallen off. We see them on the ground there. So we may get a few more blooms, but not a whole lot. I mean, there are a couple of buds here. But I don't expect a lot of color from the rest of the way out. With the vinca here, the plants are still doing well, although they are not, I wouldn't say they're thriving at this point. You see some yellowing on the leaves, but there's still some new growth and certainly enough flowers to keep them going with color. Same thing with the zinnias. Now, zinnias get really ugly this time of year, really from about October on. The plants themselves just look awful, and yet they're still supporting a fair amount of color. Now, we're not getting a lot of new zinnias at this point. In fact, I don't really see any fresh buds, but the few flowers that are out are still kind of hanging on. This little group of peach-colored ones in particular, but probably within the next week or two, I think most of these will be finished up, and we'll start pulling them out, just so they don't look quite so ratty. It does have a tendency to make a bed look pretty bad, especially these large ones that are, upwards of 4 feet in height. They do stand out, and so I may go through and at least thin out this bed at some point so they don't look quite so bad. Up here, got more vinca. These are actually doing a little bit better. Got a kind of a mix of white and pink and darker pink. These are all from seed. They've done very well this year and look like they could probably go for a while yet. These will continue to bloom to some extent, at least until we get the first frost, whenever that is. At the rate we're going, it could very well be into December. We've got our petite knockout rose here, still hanging on, still giving us some blooms. It's doing a lot better now than it was during the summer. We had a very hot summer, and the plants like this did not thrive. We didn't get a whole lot of flowers through the middle part of July and August, but right now it's doing reasonably well. More vinca over here. We have our one front yard tomato that just sort of came up on its own. A fair number of flowers on that. It's an odd sort of tomato. It's not really a grape tomato in the usual sense. It's sort of an odd shaped thing that has a fairly thick skin. They're not easy to eat, so we've just kind of let them go. They just sort of arrived on their own. We've got a few green ones growing down here, but not necessarily the best for eating, I must say. Over here we've got a few dianthus still lingering. These are interesting little flowers. They really have their strongest point in the spring, like a lot of things, but they'll continue to give us scattered flowers off and on through the rest of the growing season, even if they're not overwhelming. They do give us some color. Now over here, kind of a similar situation. We have this climbing rose that has done very well for the last couple of years. It's not really growing a whole lot bigger, which is fine with me because it's kind of gotten to the height, I want to say the high point of the trellis that it's on. And it struggled with black spot in the middle of the summer, but a lot of the leaves have come back and we're getting some beautiful blooms right now. And there are a few more buds, so hopefully we'll continue to get a little bit of color before the end of the year. Now our dahlia over here really gave us some beautiful flowers over the last few weeks. It appears to be just about finished. I don't see any more buds on it. This is one of the flowers, but it's done. So I think we're done with the dahlia. Certainly done with our black-eyed Susans. We just see the black eyes left, the seed pods, but no color. Russian sage is done. A few vinca through here, a few zinnias here and there. And then moving over into the shadier part of the yard, we have our all our spring plants. They're pretty much done. So nothing really to see there. I will show off our what I call the citrus grove, and our little lemon trees, these little miniature lemons, strangely enough, doing well. This is as far as I have ever seen these develop. This little group of lemons here, they must have gotten pollinated. So I think I said last week, somebody must have another lemon, because this was the only one that was blooming at the time that these flowers were out. Now this one has put out some flowers since then, but it was at a different time, and I don't think that this one got pollinated because it looks like the fruit are not going to make it. Strangely enough, this one, as small as it is, and it's only about a foot tall, it's already putting out more flowers. Don't know what's going to come of these since we are getting to shorter and shorter days. We have a few flowers left over here. They're very, very fragrant. A couple more lemon trees up here, but they're not really doing anything. They're just sort of existing and growing, which is fine. And then we have a big orange tree here, which has never really done anything other than grow. It's been, for the most part, a very healthy tree, but we have not gotten any flowers out of it, and needless to say, no fruit. This is our big lemon tree. It has given us flowers, but no fruit. It's never gotten pollinated. So we'll see what happens next year. But I'm really curious to see what happens with this little group of lemons here. We've got one that's almost an inch long. We've never had anything like that before. So hopefully we'll have ourselves some fruit. I'm going to be very protective of that over the next few weeks and see what happens. Hopefully we'll have something to show off. Strangely enough, something that is more typical of the spring are these snapdragons. These came back from last year, and they were doing very, very well for a good bit of the summer, and then they were pretty much finished, and here we are getting a second blooming. Not a large-scale one, but some nice, pretty pink flowers here. And speaking of pretty pink flowers, you would think it was spring over in this bed because our azaleas are still pretty fully in bloom. I thought we were kind of at the high point a couple weeks ago. This plant was, although it's still giving us some nice pink flowers now, It is past its prime. Same thing with this one. But over here, this one is particularly neat because on the same plant, we have both the light pink and these are really cool. They're kind of bicolored. You see sections, kind of like petunias almost, where there's dark pink and light pink, and then the entirely dark pink ones, but all on the same flowers, or on the same plants. And then we have quite a few buds still to go. So this should still give us a nice bit of color for another, at least another couple of weeks. This one is not as prolific. I think it's largely finished for the year, but still giving us some color. And then I'll come up through here and show off this one. Unfortunately, this one faces the street, and we've got all these in bloom. And when we lived in Ohio a few years ago, we had some azaleas, and most of them would end up getting eaten by our deer because we lived in a pretty wooded area, and that was a problem. Rhododendrons and azaleas would just get eaten almost down to the ground on a regular basis. But on the occasion when they would bloom, they pretty much just bloomed in the spring. We didn't get the twice a year blooming schedule like we have here. And these are almost as prolific right now as they are in the spring. So we'll see this again in March, and something definitely to look forward to. And then coming out to the street, there's not a lot to see here. We do have our big knockout roses. They're just giving us a handful of blooms right now. I think there's a total of 3 on the 5 plants. This is definitely a big spring plant. We'll see what these do. They've been here now for 4 years. This year they weren't quite as prolific, and I don't know if it was because of the weather or maybe they've just gotten to a point where they aren't going to do as well. I've seen that with some of our neighbors. They've had these big knockout roses that they'll do well for a few years and then they just sort of wither. So time will tell. Looking forward to the spring, which is only about 4 months away. Our growing season down here starts really about early to mid-February. We start to get our first daffodils coming up and blooming typically, and if it's a mild winter, we'll get those in mid-January. But definitely by the 1st of February, we're getting a fair number of those, which is great. You know, again, coming from Ohio, we're not getting daffodils until late March, and it's just a much, much longer growing season here. So really, we're just looking at about 3 months before that starts up again. So it doesn't seem quite so long. In Ohio, it's you know, from the time that your garden is done in the fall to the spring, it's about 6 months, and a much harder winter in the meantime. So I don't miss that, gotta be honest. Over here in our oval bed, we've got, again, kind of a mix of vinca. We have some salvia here. Thought these were done, and then here we go. We're getting some more blooms. Not a lot of them, but these bright purple flowers are so pretty. I always refer to these as rock candy flowers. That's just my own name. They kind of look like rock candy. The rest of this bed is primarily just vinca and some zinnias, mostly orange ones, which kind of fits the season, strangely enough. And I think last week we still had a few phlox back in here. I think those have finished up. This is a phlox plant right here. And then we have a few little flowers on our knockout roses. A few zinnias left, not a lot, but let's see. There's some bright red zinnias. About the only ones in the front that have that bright red color. And then a few coral colored knockout roses here, and a few buds down here. That's really about it. Our morning glories are done. Just about everything else back on this side of the bed is done. So I think that finishes things up. We do have one lone dianthus here, which is kind of typical of dianthus. It's this interesting little flower, just kind of does its own thing, and doesn't seem to have any particular schedule or agenda. And so as I say, the dianthus there, and then these over here will probably continue to bloom to some extent, at least on a low level, until we get our first frost in another week or two. So that's about it for the front yard. We're going to do our backyard video in a moment. And until next time, hope it's sunny wherever you are, and happy gardening.